I'm not sick or struck dumb. Or don't you know a kick when you see one can't quit? We're not done. We're gonna kick till the next one.
Hello, fine people, and welcome to The Kick. This is a theme, scheme, and spur twirling podcast on the Now Playing Network. I am your host, Chance Solom Pfeiffer. Today, this Vampires of America kick arrives at 1987's Near Dark, the second film from action movie revolutionary Kathryn Bigelow. Like our series opener, From Dusk Till Dawn, Near Dark is a proper and self-conscious genre hybrid. It places a roving gang of vampires in an 80s neo-western backdrop full of hazy desert nights, neon beer signs, Bill Paxton hootin' and hollerin', and one of the best saloon bust-up scenes you'll ever cap eyes on. It's also probably the most nakedly vicious movie in this series, the kind of horror film that genuinely makes you feel what it means for the undead to feast on civilians, but also pretty conspicuously thanks a knife maker in the credits. That's the tightrope it's walking. Here to discuss, she is a staff writer for Bright Wall Dark Room, the co-writer of the Seeing and Believing newsletter, and also the author of the book Becoming Alien, a feminist theological examination of the Alien franchise, Sarah Welch-Larson. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Chance. I'm delighted to talk about Near Dark.
I am excited to have you here to discuss. I saw it was in your 4 faves on Letterboxd, so I gather you wrote a great essay that I want to talk about.
Thank you.
For Bright Wall Dark Room a while ago. But maybe since it is a cult movie, and I feel like discovery is always part of the narrative around movies like this. When did you first see it, and what's your relationship been with it through the years as it became more of a favorite?
Yeah, it was. I saw it partly because it was a cult movie and it was hard to find. So support your local library. I actually found a DVD copy at the Chicago Public Library, had to request it, and it took me like 3 weeks for the copy to show up. And when it finally did, it was, this would have been, I want to say summer 2018 or 2019. So it's been a little while. And at the time I was living in an apartment that did not have air conditioning, and this would have been like August. So perfect conditions to watch this movie in because everything felt really hot and grody and sticky. And I'm pretty sure I was like drinking a Slurpee or something like that. So, like just to bring up like a little bit of the extra, kind of grimy feel that you feel in summer. Sitting in front of a fan on a laptop because I didn't have like a proper TV at the time. I just had a laptop that had a DVD drive in it. And I was kind of blown away. I wasn't expecting to fully, but it also had a little bit of this sort of forbidden fruit sort of feeling to it. Largely because like it's a movie that isn't always available on streaming. And if it is, it's on some of the more specialty streaming services. So if you only subscribe to Netflix, it's a little bit harder to see. And the DVD transfer is honestly not particularly great. I own my own copy now.
Yeah.
And it's one of my most prized possessions, but that DVD transfer is really shaky. And you can tell that somebody was just filming a projected version of the movie.
Yeah.
I don't think it was ever properly digitized. But yeah, I watched it. I kind of fell in love. And I fell in love with a lot of different aspects that we can definitely get into. But a big part of it, and one of the main reasons why I was interested in seeing it in the first place, was Bill Paxton's performance, just because it's so electrifying. So that and, sticky summer nights and just really appreciating that Kathryn Bigelow is interested in telling a good vampire story without necessarily like bending to all of the like quote unquote necessary tropes of a vampire story. Like she very clearly makes it her own. And I love that. So yeah, it's always been a big one for me. I actually was lucky enough to see it on the big screen in 35 millimeter a couple years ago. And those silhouettes are real velvety up on the big screen. And the score is amazing, especially when it's being blasted. So
man, that's very well set up. Yes. It's a Tangerine Dream score, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And yeah, just to kind of even circle back on what you're saying, like right now Near Dark is not currently streaming anywhere, and I think if you were like to go to a a Reddit thread of like, oh, what movies like need a proper 4K Blu-ray release? Like someone is going to mention Near Dark in like the top.
It's always going to be Near Dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna
Yeah, I
come
think
up.
sometimes it's on HBO/Max, whatever they're calling that now, and then sometimes it's on Criterion.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
yeah, every time it shows up on Criterion, I'll yell about it online because I think more people should watch this
Sure.
movie.
There you go.
Mhm.
So I guess brief setup for the movie before we get into the plot and much more. So it's set contemporaneously with when it comes out in the 80s, and it starts with just I don't know how old How old do you think Caleb is supposed to be? Like 18?
He's got to be like 17, 18.
Yeah.
He feels like a teenager to me, but he feels like he's just grown up enough to know better.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd put him in like his late teens. Not quite old enough to vote, definitely old enough to get away with like drinking at the gas station,
Yeah.
I think.
He's about to try to get into that bar underage, I think, when we
Oh,
meet him at
yeah.
the beginning.
Mhm.
And he's, I guess, a farm boy, you'd say, played by Adrian Pastar, who to this point had like a bit part in Top Gun. But Caleb.
Oh my gosh, that's right. I
Yeah.
forgot about
Well,
that.
and I have to confess, we're reading like, oh yeah, he played Chipper in Top Gun. I'm like, I could not begin to tell you which person in a Navy uniform that was.
Yeah, they're all under helmets. It's kind of hard to distinguish them.
Yeah. But yeah, he's come into town to hang out with his friends and try to get them to buy him a beer. He doesn't have any money, and he spots this young woman, May, played by Jenny Wright, who's just really savoring an ice cream cone, and he decides that he's gonna devote his night to trying to get a kiss, trying to hook up. She's a vampire. And bites him at the end of the night, just as dawn is approaching, and he comes down with this, whatever this illness is. It's expressed here, watching him he probably is exuding condensation a little bit like your Slurpee the first time you saw the movie. There is like a mist coming
He's
off him.
really sweaty. Yeah.
He's burning alive trying to get back home, and this RV with tinfoil and all this kind of sunproofing literally like comes through the arid field that his dad has planted in and scoops him up and whisks him away. And that's the gang of vampires that he falls in with, and he has to decide, a lot like in The Lost Boys, which comes out like a couple months later, like how initiated does he want to be? There's a certain appeal to this hot young group, although young in quotes, I should say.
Yeah.
But that's sort of our setup. But I want to turn it over to you for a second, Sarah, just in terms of like how we should think about Near Dark. I'm gonna have you fill in the blank here. Near Dark takes the vampire movie and does what?
Rolls it in the dust among the tumbleweeds, and just kind of transforms it into an examination of Western machismo, plays a little bit with the concept of American individualism, and I think manages to turn it inside out to a certain extent. Also really like takes a good hard look at American myth making and asks the question, like, is this really the kind of story that we should be telling ourselves? And that's kind of a neat device, I think, for examining the stories that we're constantly, the stories and the lies and like the half truths and everything that we as Americans kind of like grow up absorbing, and for better and worse, and quite often worse, tend to assume like we're the greatest at everything because we're Americans, and it turns out that a lot of that is built on a lie, and Catherine Bigelow isn't having any of those lies. And the best part is she never really directly addresses it. She's also just telling a really bloody vampire story at the same time. And that's kind of my favorite, is when the metaphor isn't the only point of the movie, but you can still get that metaphor shining on through. And she's not afraid to let you forget about it, but she also never really loses sight of the fact that this is also a bloody vampire movie and we're here to get scared.
I'm gonna separate your head from your shoulders.
Do it fast.
All right.
Good times roll. Woo! No! You might as well just kill me then, too.
Caleb Colton no longer belongs to our world.
We'll give him a week, see if we can call him one of us.
He belongs to hers.
But you have to learn to kill.
He belongs to theirs.
I don't want to kill.
He makes you kill tonight.
And they all belong to the night.
It's $3 short for a bus ticket home. You help me out?
What are you on?
Believe me, I told you.
Just don't think of it as killing.
Evening.
Don't think at all. It's just something that you do night after night. It's only ever a question of how.
You nervous? I would be too if I were you.
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons your essay, which I'll link to here in the show notes, is so great, because I think I did watch it and was like, yeah, it's a Western because it's set in Oklahoma and they're in a bar. I'm like, yes, this reminds me of many saloon bust-up sequences I've seen before. And then I read your essay and I was like, oh yeah, the idea of just people out there endlessly consuming is sort of what Manifest Destiny is, of just like, we'll just eat and eat and eat and this thing will go on forever because we need to eat, right? And the obvious dark side of who gets eaten and the fact that it doesn't go on forever. But I would love to break it down with you. Where do you see myth making being questioned or turned on its head here?
In a couple of different places. I mean, one, the way that we first meet our poor hero. When we first see Caleb, he's kind of sitting in the back of a pickup truck, and he looks like the ultimate like Marlboro man, sort of.
Yep.
Like he's kind of laying out. He's got his cowboy boots sticking up out of the bed of the pickup truck. There's sunset. Everything looks absolutely gorgeous. And then the moment you see him again, you realize like, oh no, this is a kid still. Like he's not self-sufficient yet. And he doesn't really know how to behave in public either. And so Bigelow is constantly just kind of undermining that image of self-sufficiency that Caleb tries to project. Like he's got the hat, he's got the cowboy boots. He doesn't quite earn his spurs yet until the very end. And then a lot of the imagery that she uses kind of drives home the fact that, one, this is not a particularly glamorous place to live. The vampires are constantly going in and out of, truck stops and railroad crossings, and kind of like they're already following the path that has been sort of paved for them by progress to begin with. So they're living on the edges, and it seems like a really empty life. And when May mentions that because they're vampires, because they own the night, they can do whatever they want, it's not really clear to me what exactly any of them are actually doing other than just eating people. The existence doesn't seem particularly fulfilling, and it's definitely not full. And it's clear that Caleb, at the very least, it's been recent enough since he's turned that he still misses the sunlight. I think it's been long enough that the rest of the vampires have kind of bought into this idea that because they only exist at night and because they are the most feared predators, they are the top of the food chain. And in a sense they are, but they kind of have to grub out this existence on the margins of society. And then one of the other things, like one of the images that I keep coming back to, is this image of Caleb returning again and again to May to feed, because he's not capable of killing anybody. He's not willing to think of himself as a killer. And I respect that about him, that he admits straight up, like, I can't do this. This is not for me. I'm not willing to do it. And yet at the same time, he keeps returning back to that well, and May has to open up a vein in her wrist so that he can feed, so that he'll continue to survive, because otherwise he's going to die, and or he's going to expose the rest of the group of vampires. And one of the more memorable shots of Caleb feeding is in an oil field.
Oh, it's a great shot.
It's fantastic. And it's very on the nose, and it still works because May is standing kind of with her feet spread apart and Caleb is kneeling in front of her. And it's pretty clear that like whatever is going on, there's also a little bit of sexual chemistry that's going on here too. But she is the one who is dominant, as opposed to him being, a self-sufficient, like guy who can exist on his own. So that kind of undermines the idea of individualism there. And then you get the oil derricks kind of pumping the lifeblood out of the earth at the same time that Caleb is threatening to drink May dry. And when she finally breaks apart from him and says, like, you can't drink all of that, you're going to kill me if you drink all my blood, he still doesn't understand. Like, he doesn't get the stakes. He's laughing at her. And maybe it's because he feels high on her blood. It's not entirely clear to me. But there's just those touches like that where there's a lot of detail and a lot of it's on the surface, But if you keep digging, there's additional depths that keep going and going and going. And I think that idea of westward expansion and the idea of kind of stripping the earth of its resources, those are both very much inherently tied up with each other as well. So
Totally. And you have this tension with Caleb and the rest of the group of they're like, you need to kill someone. You are not like pulling your own weight here. Like you're not creating wealth. You're not creating jobs in the way that we are, as though like everything that they've gotten, they've just taken.
Yeah, they're thieves. Like Bill Paxton's wearing multiple sheriff badges on his leather jacket. It's pretty clear that he killed somebody to get each of those.
It's true. I also really, in thinking about your writing and your take on the movie, really liked the slow roll of the car as it explodes at the end, where it's just like going and going, and it's like driving almost like stuck in neutral, like long past where Jesse is gonna be able to do anything. Just kind of did remind me of like, that suits the metaphor as well, of just like a zombie wagon train just out there in the dust. Like they're going, but like they don't know why, and it's half dead, and it's just gonna continue until it explodes or
a
goes
lot of
into a
their
rut.
movement feels pretty aimless too. Like it's not clear that they're going in any one direction. Like obviously westward expansion was very much a thing. But there's also this idea of we're just going to kind of go wherever the wind takes us because we think that we deserve all of this. And that feels very much akin to like the idea of manifest destiny being a myth about like we are purposefully expanding because we own this land and we deserve it, and it has been, you know, divinely ordained for us to take. These vampires are kind of doing something similar. It's just that it's so much more aimless because there isn't really anything for them to conquer, nor should they be conquering anything either. Kind of undermines them in a couple of different ways there.
So let's talk Paxton, because that was also
yes.
what I knew about this movie. It was like, you got to see Paxton, and other people who even took other movies in this series were just like, you haven't seen Near Dark, you need to watch for Paxton. So I was ready, and I still kind of wasn't.
Oh, you? I got a new name for you. Mr. Big Knuckle. You having a little trouble with your hog leg there?
Did you know that Bill Paxton had that in him the first time you saw this movie?
No, I'd had no idea. I hadn't seen much of his work, and I mean, he's got a fairly large body of work, so there's a decent amount that I still haven't seen.
Sure.
But what I always associate Bill Paxton with Aliens, and that's such a different character. That to kind of just watch him like charge off the screen with this really feral energy, kind of took me aback. It definitely knocked me over on my heels. And it's just a lot of it has to do with the way that he embodies this character. So he's this vampire named Severin, who's kind of like this leather jacket wearing kind of biker cowboy who's going to kill everybody, and he's going to enjoy it, and he's going to laugh at you while he's doing it. And I think he's just so caught up in his own, you know, masculinity and his own power that he kind of genuinely thinks that he's invincible.
Yeah.
And for the most part, he's right, which is also what makes him so scary. But he's so good at like bringing that shit-eating grin into everything that he does because he knows he can get away with it. I find that terrifying. And I find the bar scene, which I know we'll get into, especially terrifying because he's enjoying himself so much. And he's kind of like stretching it out because he's enjoying that feeling of power over other people.
It's true. I always associate Paxton with like a level of goofiness, whether he's playing a good guy or a bad guy or a weak guy or a strong guy. And I think the thing that is kind of amazing about this movie is like, I think if you just look what he's saying in the script, it kind of is still sort of goofy a lot of the times. Like when he first, what is the line I wrote
Like, I'm
down?
gonna separate your head from your neck. Hope you don't mind.
Yeah, Caleb asks, "What's going on?" when he gets thrown into the RV, and he goes, "It's not about what's going on; it's about what's coming off your face," which is like a
Yeah.
real kind of '80s high school bully
Mm-hmm.
line. But also, I think this is like it made me think about how any great performance is also a collaboration of lighting and directing and blocking and all of these things, where it's like in that whole bar scene you kind of never see the whites of his eyes, and in the second half he puts sunglasses on,
Mm-hmm.
and that just like creates a level of frightening anonymity, because you just, and then it's just all teeth is what your
Yeah.
eyes are focused on, because your eyes
Yeah.
are drawn to the whites of the teeth. And then, as you say, just like the physicality that he's allowed to have of like jumping on the bar,
And
playing
he was
with his
not a
own-
small man either. Like, he was
No.
tall, and he's very imposing, and he uses that to such great effect.
Yeah.
He's
Do
not
you have
even
a favorite-
moving all that much. He's just kind of like there. And then when he does move, it's really fast.
It is really fast, and you don't. The amazing thing is like you don't know that the spur thing is possible until
Yeah.
he's doing it. And you're like, oh, I guess you can do that.
Yeah. One of the many reasons why I'm scared of ice skates, honestly. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
It's a legitimate concern. Do you have a favorite kind of line or moment from the Severin character?
Oh man. It's less a line and more motion. It's after he starts to confront the guy in the bar who's by the jukebox. And the guy by the jukebox tries like wrapping his own hands around Severin's neck. And Paxton starts laughing. And then he steals the guy's sunglasses and just kind of like lifts them up and turns them around and sticks them on his head, and then holds his hands by the side of his head as though he's like completed some kind of a magic trick. And like the grin on his face then, and then basically everything after he's killed that guy, where he's got all of the blood on his mouth, is just like it's one of the most charismatic things I think I've ever seen, and also one of the most scary things I think I've ever seen. And I don't know how they managed to get that balance just right. But it does, I don't know, like it goes a really long way for explaining like how this guy has managed to get as far as he has in life, or I guess in undeath.
Yeah.
Because he's probably done this before. And
For
I
sure.
think he definitely gets a kick out of it. But yeah, stealing the sunglasses off the guy by the jukebox, just it freaks me out, and it's also like really, really compelling, and it's just done in one fluid motion. It's fantastic.
What else about that scene? Because I mean, you could talk about like where people are positioned in it. You've got the cramps covering Peggy Lee's fever, transitioning into the George Strait. Now the Cowboy Rides Away?
It is the Cowboy Rides Away. Yeah.
But and I think that also when people think of Near Dark, most minds go right to that scene. Is there anything else going on that makes that scene so killer for you?
It's the alignment with the vampires as the main characters within this scene.
Yeah.
Like everybody, they all kind of roll in like black hats into a saloon.
Right.
And that's part of what makes the scene so great, is like it is so clearly a riff on classic Western scenes. You even get a defenestration at the end where someone goes flying out a window. It's like it's so great. And yet it's still kind of adhering to its own grammar and syntax, and it's interested in how all of these characters feel about the fear that they're inflicting on everybody else. And everybody else in the bar, even though the vampires don't really think of them as people or as much that's worthy of notice beyond the fact that like they're food, you still get a sense of every single one of those people in that bar. The guy at the bar has a Second Amendment hat on, and he clearly thinks of himself as a guy who can take care of himself. And in any other circumstance, he'd probably be pretty right. The waitress has clearly seen some shit. The bartender has clearly seen some shit. And every single one of them feels so unique and distinct. And yet when the fear sets in, you can immediately tell the difference between the humans and the vampires. And you can tell how and why you would just kind of be frozen in place if you were in that position as well, even if you're tough, even if you're capable of taking care of yourself. There are some things that it's just impossible to anticipate. And I think that Bigelow understands the nature of that kind of violent power really, really well. it's terrifying. And the music is also absolutely fantastic. Like, I love the score for this. I also strongly suspect that one of the reasons why this movie has not gotten a restoration is it's a music rights thing. And I think it's kind of similar to the Strange Days tie-up, where there's no proper remastery of either of those movies. And I think a big part of that is the soundtracks are so good and so distinct, and like music rights always screws everything over, unfortunately.
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, she does have two that are totally in purgatory, but are increasingly beloved by film nerds with each passing year.
For good reason. I think those are her two best movies, at least of the ones that I've seen. So
nice. I love the way you broke that down too, because the guy at the bar is Robert Winley, who's also in the bar. There's so many Cameronian ties over between Bigelow.
He's got a very Cameron face too, you know?
Yeah, well, Robert Winley's in the biker bar at the beginning of T2. And what you're describing is not the same as the, like, here's a real big guy. Oh, Arnold's bigger. It's like everyone in this bar in Near Dark, like, tries their thing, where it's just like, well, I'll just be cool around this weird handsy table, or I'll tell him, like, don't come any closer, man, or I'll go get the shotgun behind the bar. And when it doesn't work, it's the actors all are terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once your fallback like doesn't work, like what else are you supposed to do, you know?
Yeah.
And half of them freeze and the other half fight, and either way it just doesn't really work out for them particularly well. The other thing that I like is that all of the bar denizens are very unique and distinct.
Yeah.
All of the vampires are unique and distinct, and you kind of get a sense for how each of them hunts too. So obviously Bill Paxton is kind of the centerpiece of the scene, and rightly so. But you get a sense for how Diamondback, Jeanette Goldstein's character, and Hooker, I can't remember his first name off the top of my head right now. Jesse, thank you. Jesse, Lance Henriksen's character. You get the sense for how those two work as a team, where they're interested more in trickery than they are in straight up violence. And then you also get Homer, who's willing to just shoot people in the back because they'll underestimate him because he looks like a little kid. And then the vampire who struck me the most this time around, having watched this movie like half a dozen times, is May, because she is probably the youngest out of the group in terms of having been a vampire. And yet she's also one of the coldest. So she gets up, she wipes the blood off her mouth, and it's clear that she understands that having blood on your mouth is something that would be very off-putting to a human being. And she goes up to the pool player and she says, like, we're going to dance to this song. So they dance to the Cowboy Rides Away, and she seems very tender and sweet, like she's trying to calm him down. It's clearly been the worst night of this guy's life. And then at the drop of a hat, she turns around and she says, Caleb, this guy's for you. And the look on her face is just so cold and so stone-faced. And it's clear she doesn't think of this guy as a person either. He's also still food. And she just wants Caleb to be able to succeed in killing somebody so that he's not going to get killed by Severin as well. And I find that turn deeply disturbing, almost as disturbing as the sunglasses moment with Bill Paxton a little bit earlier.
I do also like that, yeah, every time the camera cuts to baby James LeGros in one of his first film roles, like 5 or 6 times, and there's no explicit, like, they're hypnotizing people to keep him there, but he is just, like, stock still in the same spot every time the camera cuts.
Doesn't know what to do. Yeah.
Waiting for May to eventually saunter over during a song change. So I really also was quite struck and quite upset almost by the Joshua John Miller performance as Homer. Yeah. I found pretty creepy, especially when Caleb's dad and sister eventually catch up with them, and Homer is kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say comes out of his shell, but is sort of like, all of a sudden his purpose as a character is clear, of like, let me stick another kid in this eternal hell that I am in. But you don't often see someone like have a child actor, I guess, do like give a predatory performance. And that, because he, like, when he meets Sarah by the end, is the sister Sarah? Am I making that up?
Yeah, her name's Sarah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's over by the Coke machine, I think, and he just kind of walks up in these dumbstruck.
Lisp that he hasn't been doing the rest of the time, as if to soften himself, this however old this person inside of him is. And it's scary as shit.
Yeah. It's like he knows exactly which buttons to push to disarm her. Because she kind of, when they first meet, he's staring because he's like, here's my chance. Maybe I'll have somebody else. And she immediately is like, it's impolite to stare. This kid is going places. Like, she understands when to draw a boundary.
True.
And he knows how to walk all over that boundary in a really disarming way. I also just love the way that Joshua John Miller smokes cigarettes. I'm not sure if you're supposed to say that about a 10-year-old. But he's got the affectation down pat. Like, he gets how an adult would do something like this.
That's true.
And it's genuinely unsettling. Yeah, he's great. I do kind of like that he gets his due too by the end, because his death is kind of treated as this is the final one that needs to happen in order for everybody else to be fully defeated. Like, Jesse and Diamondback almost feel a little bit like an afterthought at that point.
That's true.
Yeah. So yeah, he gets that climactic, a little bit janky, but it's still pretty affecting final sequence there.
Janky because the flame
special effects aren't particularly great. The compositing doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I've been so caught up with those characters that I don't really care too much about it.
Of all the things they asked this child actor to do, they drew the line at sort of smearing the stuntman flame gel on him. They didn't want to do that.
Setting him on fire. I do appreciate that line.
Yeah, right. It's fine. So I wanted to ask you about Near Dark in the context of Bigelow's filmography, because I guess I associate her with action movies, as I said at the top, because she has made so many great ones. But I also, you could also just as easily call them like maybe tension movies. But I wanted to know, so this is her only horror Western, because it's not often like a genre hybrid that you return to over and over again. But do you see specific Bigelow pet themes or interests in here that kind of go across her filmography?
Yeah. I think she does an interesting job of deconstructing masculinity, for one.
Yep, that's really true.
American myth making, absolutely. And in those terms, I'm thinking primarily of The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, where she's thinking about kind of the toll that violence takes on a person. And I strongly suspect, I know that both of those movies can be a little bit controversial. I think that she is not necessarily on the same side as her protagonists for either of those. It really feels like she is trying to understand something that she herself is not always fully aligned with. And sometimes she gets up to that line and it feels a little bit more uncomfortable. But I think she's trying to understand. And that to me kind of comes back to the bar sequence, which is the most compelling scene in the entire movie, where she's getting at the psychology behind these vampires and why and how they do the things that they do and how they're so effective about it. I get a lot of that same sense out of the way that she frames Jessica Chastain in Zero Dark 30 and the way that she presents Jeremy Renner's performance in The Hurt Locker as well. I really think that she is interested in getting into the core of the American psyche, where we keep telling ourselves that we're the protagonists of the whole story of the universe. And whenever we get into that, and whenever we get so tied up in that myth of American individualism and exceptionalism, it becomes incredibly destructive for literally everybody else around us. And she's good at showing that aftermath too. I keep thinking about the final frame of Zero Dark 30, where you see the look on Jessica Chastain's face after her character has managed to kind of overcome everything that she's been trying to overcome up until this point, and realizing, like, she can go anywhere she wants. She can do whatever she wants. She has been effectively set free, quote unquote, from her mission. And she doesn't know who she is outside of that mission anymore, because it has completely undone her. And the violence that she has done in order to attain her goal has also scarred her soul, for lack of a better word. And I think that that's something that you see pretty clearly in Near Dark as well. It feels a little bit more fantastical in Near Dark to a certain extent, but it's absolutely there too.
Yeah. I was thinking too, she also just loves a gang. She loves a gang of dudes who are like, what are the rules that you think you live by? What are the rules of this gang? I think Johnny Utah and Bodie and in Point Break.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then you get drawn into the other one and you're like, are these rules any better? And then at the end you kind of walk away alone thinking about like, how far am I really willing to go with any of this?
And she feels pretty ambivalent towards a lot of those rules and those gangs too. And I think that's what gives her the ability to come up so close to examining them, because she's not just treating it like, oh, this is an other. I could never be like this. I think there is definitely a certain level of seductiveness that I think she finds in a lot of these characters, even when they're doing truly heinous things on screen.
Sarah, let's do the vampire questionnaire that I'm posing to everyone in this series. If we've covered some of these things already, we can go quick. What do you think is the most upsetting thing about these particular vampires?
Oh, the way they enjoy everything that they're doing. And like none of them wipe their mouths after they've fed either. It's really gross. Like everybody's got blood on their mouth during the shootout the day after the bar scene.
That's true. They let it hang around. I don't
They're
know.
really grody.
Would you prefer additional Severin KFC finger licking? Is that more hygienic?
That's still gross too, but
kind of a no-win situation once you're biting people.
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you find these vampires to be metaphors or just killers? I think we covered this.
Yeah, I think they're primarily killers, but they also serve as a really good metaphor at the same time, which again, my favorite mode of filmmaking, because you can do both and you can watch both and both work.
Absolutely. In terms of classic vampire lore references or tropes, too many, too few, or the right amount in Near Dark?
I think the right amount, but there's not very many. So you get the cross on Jesse and Diamondback's pistol, and it's upside down when you see it framed, which I think is a really nice touch. You get the animals don't like these guys trope, which is a little less common. And then you get the transfusion, which is also like classic Dracula and not so much everywhere else.
Right.
Other than that, and daylight, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know that you really get anything else. Like clearly no garlic. I guess eating food kind of makes them sick a little bit too, but that's not really like they don't play with that one particularly hard and fast either, because May's eating an ice cream cone when we first meet her too.
That's right. I did want to call out just like one of the most affecting things about this movie, because I don't know where else I would necessarily place this in the episode, is like how when Caleb is trying to get back, he's trying to leave the gang for the first time and get back to his family, how sort of instantly he resembles a person who is like addicted and strung out on the street, and just how everyone is like kind of instantly disgusted by him, and doesn't want to give him $3 and doesn't trust him and doesn't care if he gets home. And that the idea that as like an unspoken societal force is going to like push him back to the vampire gang, I found pretty disturbing. And also like many things in here, like not a ton of attention is drawn to it. The idea is like, this is just what happens when you become a vampire in this movie. But the responses people have are very recognizable.
Yeah, and that's upsetting too. And I do think like I've got the Western like American myth making read of this movie. I could also just as easily see someone making an argument that this is a movie about drug use or a movie about the AIDS epidemic. I think either would totally work. And I don't know that I like where either of those metaphors necessarily go, at least in terms of like humanizing people who are caught up in both of those things. But given the time that the movie takes place in, I'm sure that was top of mind for the audiences who did end up seeing this movie.
Yeah, especially the relationship between Caleb and his dad of just like, I'm with these guys now because you never paid any attention. Which is I'm reducing it too much. I think there's much more to their relationship, but there are moments like that are very like, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your kids are?
Yeah. Which, I mean, I like this version a lot better than the Lost Boys version personally, but I'm also not a Lost Boys person at all.
That's okay.
Yeah.
These are very different movies. Best way to kill vampires, according to this movie.
Oh, daylight. Daylight's the best
Yeah.
disinfectant. Shoot a bullet through the house. You know? I do love that shootout very much, where you just get like sunlight coming through,
Oh,
and you see it like
yeah.
going in a ton of different directions, and it's clear that like bullets not going to bother these guys. Daylight absolutely will.
I do also love the idea that in just like a trope-heavy, trope-infested genre that you can still kind of do your own thing with it, where it's just like the daylight burns them and it heals and it burns them for a while, but there is some point if it burns them too much, then it's an explosion. And it's like, okay, I instantly buy the logic that you're working with, even though I don't know if
think
I've
it
ever seen
rocks.
that before. Yeah.
Yeah.
On a scale of Orlok to Cullen, how hot are these vampires, Sarah?
Which Orlok are we talking? Are we talking Max Shrek or are we talking Sarsgaard?
I'll say Shrek for traditionalism's
fair.
sake.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't like that I find these vampires as compelling and attractive as I do. I think that speaks a little bit to my own, like, I am also an American and I find those myths compelling even as I am off-put by them.
Sure.
Yeah, Bill Paxton stealing the sunglasses. Again, one of the most like charismatic things I think I've ever seen anybody do. And it's deeply upsetting at the same time. Like he's murdering a dude while he's doing it. Buckets of
I
blood,
hear you.
also my thing though. So
Is this sadist wearing a leather jacket? I hear you. I hear you on the against the better nature thing. Some quick questions. This movie, I felt the same way after doing Point Break on this show a few months ago. Why do you think Catherine Bigelow gunfire just sounds better than 99% of other movie gunfire?
if you ever find out, we should bottle it, honestly.
Okay.
Like I would wear that like perfume. I don't know if you can't really wear a sound, but you know what I mean. Like it's a great sound and she does it so well.
I don't know if it's just like louder or more or maybe it sounds like a rounder sound when she does it, and it kind of reminds me of like the sound of in Michael Mann's Heat in that echoey, the climactic robbery. But like, man, it's just like we're so desensitized to that stuff. And I watch a Catherine Bigelow movie, and it's like, oh my god, guns are big and scary.
And I think that's the thing is she makes it scary the same way that Michael Mann makes gunplay scary too. Even when his characters are engaging in heroics, it's like that's a thing that can kill you and it's not something you should ever take lightly. It's got to be that and the fact that they're both, I think, are two American directors who get American masculinity almost better than anybody else does. Like Mann and Bigelow both, like I'll watch any of their examinations of what it is to be a guy in the United States.
There are many, as we said, James Cameron crossovers from Aliens into this movie. One from the Terminator movies is cinematographer Adam Greenberg, who just tees up, I don't know, shot after shot after shot in this movie. Do you have favorites you want to shout out?
Oh yeah. So the shot of Adrian Pastar's boots sticking out of the back of the pickup, I find very compelling, and maybe it's because like it's one of the rare times where you see sunlight. I love the silhouette of Caleb riding the horse into town, where you're first tracking the hooves and then you see the full horse. And there's been rain, so the streets are kind of slick and blue, and it's like that lovely deep, deep blue that you get, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to the deep blue that you get in Aliens, actually. Like that shows up everywhere. And then the silhouette shot of Caleb picking up his hat after the truck has exploded. And you get this fireball in the background. And he's kind of standing up and he's straightening up and his hat's off. And it's clear like he's been messing with something that is so much bigger than he is. And he finally recognizes it, and then he gets to pick up like the second half of that spur. Like he's finally earned his spurs, and I love that for him.
That's cool. Yeah, for sure. Do you have a just sort of a like little nugget or a moment from this movie that maybe we haven't talked about that arrives with you when you become like a near dark devotee?
The moment when May steps into the light at the gas station, really early on.
Yeah.
When she's eating the ice cream cone and she kind of makes eye contact with Caleb, and then she looks away, and she looks a little bit like a deer in the headlights. And the way that she straightens up, she looks like a prey animal in that shot the first time you see the movie. And then every single other time you see it, it's clear that she is the predator in this situation.
Yeah.
And she's working to reel him in. And I love that plays both ways so well. And it's a great shot too. Also fantastic lighting.
Gotta thank the Coors sign for part of that.
Oh,
part
yeah.
of that moment.
Yeah.
And then I was gonna ask you best angle on vampirism that this movie adds. Horses as vampire detectors, or sometimes that vampires have to bite a hairy neck, an unshaved neck, and they don't like that.
I'll see that, and I'll also raise you that guy tasted like a dead polecat, which I think means that he'd been smoking marijuana up until that point, and like it's a nice detail. It's good.
I like it, but yeah, also maybe these vampires have tried more exotics. Have they tried the larger rodents at some point?
Oh yeah.
Just will this get it done? Polecats, muskrats, beavers?
He's got to be the kind of guy who's had roadkill at least once, you know? Like he just comes across as the kind of guy who would be like, possum? Sure, why not?
I know you're joking, but also that kind of does fit in perfectly with that world, the way that just everyone is like dependent on the highway.
Oh yeah. And they probably all smell terrible.
Yep. It's all been building to this, Sarah. As a Chicagoan, how do you feel about the suggestion that these vampires started the Great Chicago Fire of 1871?
I kind of love it, largely because the myth of Mrs. O'Leary's cow is actually quite racist against Irish people.
Okay.
It was used as a form of discrimination, like blaming people from a quarter of the city that most people who were in and on the up would have looked down on at the time. Like people were super racist against Irish people back in the 1800s. So, I like it as like an alternative myth. I think Mrs. O'Leary's cow has very much been debunked over and over again, but it's common enough that people just associate that with it. So I like it as an act of arson amongst characters who just would not give a rip either way.
Let me ask you one more thing, actually, because I want to get another plug for your Alien book. I imagine that you have spent a fair bit of time thinking about Lance Henriksen's performance as Bishop.
Yeah.
What do you see him doing here as far as showing his range? I know he's played a lot of villains, but what do you make of the Jesse, the big bad performance?
Oh, man. Well, the other moment that I should have mentioned when I was talking about May stepping into the light for the first time is the moment where Jesse takes a bullet to the chest and promptly spits it out.
Oh, my God. Yes.
And it's so good. And it's so understated, too. I think any other actor would have probably overplayed it. And Lance Henriksen is just like, here you go, man. Like, I'm going to stick this in your pocket and kind of pat it shut. Good luck with that, because this isn't going to work on me. Yeah, he's so great. He's got kind of that gravelly look. And it also seems like he's kind of having fun, especially in the shootout scenes as well. Like he goes all arms akimbo, and he's wearing those really goofy goggles with like the nose guard at one point.
That's right.
Yeah, like there's probably some kind of vanity in there, because you probably don't want your nose to get burned too much too frequently or something. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm a few sunburns away from getting one of those, I think.
Yeah, same here actually. Yeah, it's great because he's so cool and calm and gravelly, and then occasionally like you can tell that he's still got a temper on him. He's just been around long enough to know when to turn that up and when to turn it back.
Good point.
Yeah.
What this series is building up to the release of Sinners. Is that a movie you're anticipating at all, Sarah?
I cannot friggin' wait for Sinners. I'm so excited.
What are you most jazzed about?
Oh, man. I mean, Ryan Coogler, again, is going to be great. I really like the idea of Michael B. Jordan playing against himself. It's fun to watch actors kind of play a dual role. I dig the setting. I'm excited for another vampire movie. Like, kind of everything, honestly. Just, like, hook it into my veins. I'll take it. I'm here for it.
And I don't know what it's going to be yet, but I could totally see it being, of course, thematically rich about American, myths and the racism that's in the blood of the country in a similar way to Near Dark.
Yeah.
I
really
assume it's there.
I will be disappointed if it isn't, honestly.
If it's just a vampire movie, that would be disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to plug or direct people to?
Oh, yeah. So I am around the internet, especially on Blue Sky, at Dodgy Boffin, which is also my website, which is where you can find links to my personal newsletter and to the Seeing and Believing newsletter, which I co-write with fellow Chicago critic Kevin McLenithan. And yeah, we do a lot of reviews and coverage. We will definitely be covering Sinners when it comes out.
Cool.
Cannot wait for that. And then I also am a staff writer for Brightwell Dark Room. And I have written the book Becoming Alien, The Beginning and End of Evil in Science Fiction's Most Idiosyncratic Film Franchise, which is a subtitle I always almost forget whenever I
Nailed
have to
it.
plug it. Thank you.
Like the Alien franchise itself, you hunted around and found it.
Yeah, it carries on, and it'll keep on going for as long
by
as
word.
that sucker makes money. So.
Yeah, well, it was great to talk to you. Thanks for the time and for kind of initiating me to this movie. It was a great reason to do it.
This was fantastic. Thank you, Chance. Always happy to have the chance to talk about Near Dark. It's a great movie.
All right. This is where the cowboy rides away.
Woo!